Et voila. All right. Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? I see you can unmute yourself so you can respond. Not everybody is showing me their video. Some of you, I think, probably maybe don't have a webcam, or you just as soon not be seen today. So this doesn't work. I got to hear from you. How y'all doing?
Doing good.
Good.
Hanging in there? Yeah. Yeah, trying to. That's all anybody can do, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Living the dream, right? Living the dream. Well, good news. We're over halfway to the end. So we only have after today, after this week, it's only 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Not bad. Okay, you can go ahead and mute your mics if you want so we don't hear the background jazz. Okay. It's great to see all of you. I want to quick do our usual roll call just so I've got a sense of who's all here and who might not have been able to join us this morning. So we got Lauren.
Here.
Awesome. Connor.
Here.
Awesome. Jake already told me he couldn't make it. AJ. I think I saw AJ. Yeah, I see you.
Yeah.
You're there. Yep. Thank you. Joe Corno.
Here.
Joe D. Pasquale. Sorry, man. My brain is not working. Claire.
Here.
Awesome. Bryce.
Here.
I know I saw you. Patrick.
Here.
Great. Kyle.
Here.
Excellent. Lexi.
Here.
Awesome. Sam Hoffman. No Sam Hoffman yet? Okay. Max. Max, are you here? I thought I saw you. You need to unmute, Max. Chloe.
Here.
Awesome. Clay.
Here.
Cool. Tiana.
Here.
Great. Sam Martinez.
Here.
I see your note, Max. No worries. Annika.
Here.
Cool. Gerardo.
Here.
Sweet. So nice to hear your voices. Lindsay.
Here.
Yep. Sam Schmitz.
Here.
Mason.
Here.
Cool. Katie.
Here.
Yeah. Nick. No Nick. No Nick. Okay. Evan.
Here.
Sweet. And Dave.
Here.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. Again, I appreciate you getting up. Are your days running into each other? A little bit? Yeah. A little weird, right? Okay. Well, let's see. My coworker, Gary, was here, and now he's stepped away. He's apparently taking a break. So perhaps he'll show up later. This is the white cat. He may appear. Anybody's pets hanging out? I like cats and dogs. No, nobody wants to show me their lovey. Dang it. All right. Okay. Okay. So today, here's what we're going to do, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm going to do a quick review of chapter 5. That's a really big chapter. There are a lot of theories of motivation, and the reality is, even with all the ones that are covered in chapter 5 and then again in chapter 6, we will have only touched on what might be considered the most well-known. I don't know if popular is really the right word, but the most well-known theories. Motivation, like leadership, is probably one of the most studied topics, not only in organizational behavior, but just in general. In psychology and sociology and anthropology, essentially in all of the behavioral sciences. So it is an enormous topic. There are literally tens of thousands of articles that have been produced on this topic. So when we talk about tip of the iceberg, we're really at the tip of the iceberg with what we're studying, and it's still a lot. So I want to make sure that we're all tracking, okay? And I've said this before. And I know y'all got a lot going on, but you really do. I'll reiterate it. You need to listen to those narrated PowerPoints. I go beyond what you can just read on your lecture outlines or even looking at the PDF of the PowerPoint. I never include all of what I might say because that would just be gross to try and look at on a PowerPoint slide. And there are important nuances that I point out while I'm doing the narration. So please listen to those. The last thing I want to have to do is lecture on all the points again because I don't want to waste your time. Okay. So I'll do a quick overview. Then I want to talk about last week's discussion question, which was the give one word that describes you and why. And I want to then link that to a couple of different things, including this week's discussion question. Those of you who've had a chance to answer it already, that's awesome. Thank you for doing that. For the rest of you, I want to make a note. I had asked, I don't know if it's 2 weeks ago now, if you wanted a little bit later than noon on Friday to respond to the discussion question. I did get one response that said, yeah, if you could push it back a little bit. So I've changed the time deadline to 6 p.m. I mean, I could go later. I just, I don't know. What I don't want to do, honestly, folks, is dig into your weekend too much with this class. Are you with me? I mean, my experience with this whole quarantine thing is the days kind of blend into each other. And all of a sudden, we're always working, right? Or always doing classwork. And I don't think that's healthy. So I'm trying as much as possible to minimize requirements of you on the weekend. Obviously, you do things when you want to, right? To fit your schedule, but I'm trying to balance that for you. I'll give you a very short preview of chapter 6, and I want to talk about the topic infographics. So that's the plan for today. Anything else I should be thinking about? Anything else that you have questions about? If you do, go ahead and put something in the chat, and that way I'll know to respond to any questions or comments that you might have. Otherwise, does that schedule for today sound okay? I'm counting on those of you who've left your video up to give me those nonverbals. So if you're one of those, beloved, God bless you, Joe. Thank you. If you're one of those people, this stuff, these, whatever you want to do, it's great. And the rest of you who don't want us to look at you, come on. Come on already. I know that sometimes it's internet stuff, but if you didn't happen to get showered and beautiful, trust me, the great thing about this medium is we can't really tell. So you shouldn't worry about that if that's a concern. All right, so let's go ahead and do the quick review of chapter 5. There are 6 things that I want to talk about from chapter 5. So if you've got your lecture outline handy, again, I realize for some of you printing is not necessarily possible. I get that. I realize that. So it's okay for you to look on your screen and to go along, but you definitely want to have this handy. 6 things. So the first is starting on page 1. And I want to emphasize again this idea that we can't motivate other people. We often use this language inappropriately, or I should say, in a way that causes ambiguity around the actor. Let me try and explain what I mean. We'll say things like, I need to motivate my employees, or I need to figure out how to motivate my students. Or as you become parents, those of you who are thinking about doing that someday, I need to figure out how to motivate my kids. And the reality again is that you can't motivate anybody else. There's only one person on the planet that you can motivate. That's you. With everybody else, all we can do is try to create the conditions under which people will choose to be motivated. I can't motivate you as your professor. It's all on you, folks. What I can do is try to make the stuff interesting. I can try to make it so that what I'm asking you to do seems reasonable to you. I can try to make it so it's challenging enough to draw your interest, but not overwhelming. Are you with me? So all I can do is create these conditions, but ultimately it's on you to decide whether to be motivated. It's the same for me as an employee. My boss, the dean, He doesn't motivate me. What he does is try to make it possible for me to choose to be motivated, in large part because of the way my job is structured. And I'm going to really dive into that in chapter 6, how important the way that a job is structured or designed is if we're hoping to create the conditions under which people will choose to be motivated. I'm going to come back to this idea of self-motivation when I do a little bit of conversation today about this week's discussion question. So I'll move on right now. I'm assuming this is all pretty clear so far. Yes? Okay. The second thing I want to talk about is on page 2. And it's this idea of how you and I, with the assumptions that we make about other people, how we create self-fulfilling prophecies. And I talk about this in the narrative PowerPoint, and I want to emphasize it. And the reason I want to emphasize it is that I think this is one of these realities of humanity that people often, too often perhaps, forget or don't realize. And I want to use the example of me thinking about all of you. All right. We haven't met, most of us. I've met a few of you in person. Some of you, my advisees, you poor things, okay? But we don't know each other yet in person. Hopefully, at some point, starting next fall, we'll have a chance to interact more, and that'll be great. I, just like everybody else on the planet, make assumptions about other people and what makes them tick. Let me describe for you what would fit under the category of Theory X in a time of professors and students and quarantining, all this social distancing, our COVID-19 awesomeness, right? I'm going to talk Theory X, I'm going to talk Theory Y. And I'm going to say me, but I don't necessarily mean me, okay? I mean professors in general. A professor who would make Theory X assumptions about you all would assume that mostly you don't really care about learning at this point. You're out of the classroom. The pressure that comes from having to show up in a class, in a physical class, is reduced. And because that pressure is gone, you're going to do as little as possible just to get by. Because you don't actually care about learning. Is everyone tracking with me so far? This is a perfect example of Theory X assumptions that faculty members might make about students right now, given everything that's going on. I'll add to this. I'm just going to pile on. We would assume a professor making Theory X assumptions living right now would assume that y'all can't be trusted, that you're basically going to cheat as much as possible, that if we were to give a timed exam, which in this class I'm not doing, but if we were to give a timed exam, you would be finding different ways to sort of get around the restrictions, etc. You would, while we're having synchronous class right now, do everything except pay attention. You would chime in, you would show that you're present, and then you would kind of go off and do whatever you wanted to do and hope that it doesn't matter. Is everyone with me so far? Now imagine that those are the assumptions I made about you all. If I really believed that you don't care about any of this, I might also adopt a position of not caring about any of this. That's one possibility. So I might just be like, I don't really care what you do. I don't really care if you get it. I'm giving exams the way I always give exams. I'm having the assignments be what I always have. I'm not willing to chat with you outside of class or anything like that. How much do you think you would care if I treated you that way? Probably not so much, right? I mean, the way that human beings respond to that lack of care, that clear belief that y'all don't care, is they stop caring. That's actually how it works. It's an amazing system. If I treat you like I expect you to cheat, you will be more likely to cheat. If I treat you like I think you don't care about any of this, you will be less likely to care about any of this. And so we have this self-fulfilling prophecy. Now let's go the other way. Let's go to the theory why. Theory why. The assumptions that a person might make would include the following. You do care about learning. You care a great deal. It's one of the reasons that having to learn this way instead of being in a class is driving you crazy, because you do prefer the opportunity to be in actual conversation with a professor. But it's not just that. It's also when you're in a classroom around other classmates, there's a whole series, a whole set of nonverbals that are happening that help you to know whether you're understanding the material at least as well as everybody else. There is more natural opportunity for you to ask questions. For example, like right after class or right before class. Because of that, because that is perhaps your preference, this is hard. And a professor making theory why assumptions would understand this is hard. This isn't the way that we would normally do things. I'll tell you right now that the things I assume about you fit pretty well under this theory why stuff. I assume that you still care. I assume you want to learn. I assume you want to do a good job. I assume that you want to get back on campus as soon as possible. I assume that you're doing your best to get by every day. I also assume that some days are easier than others. I assume that you will do what you would normally do in terms of your class assignments. You will go as hard as you possibly can, given all the other circumstances of your life. Now, when a person makes those kinds of assumptions, how are the students likely to respond? So let me insert the step in between, my behavior toward you. So we're having some of these classes where it's in real time. It's still not like being in class, right? It's just not. I can't do some of the things I would normally like to do in terms of putting you into groups, but I'm trying at least to have some conversation with you. I had the one-on-one Google Hangout conversations with you about the assignment, the topic infographic, where I also tried to learn a little bit more about you and your circumstances so I can adapt and so on. And because of all that, my expectations are that y'all are gonna, I haven't had a chance to finish reading through the exams yet, but my assumption is that those are gonna be good. That's my assumption. I haven't indicated to you in any fashion that I think they won't be. So I'll bet I'm gonna be right. Just like the topic infographics, which I'll talk about later, those are some of the best topic infographics I've seen. Amazing how assumptions lead to our behavior, which leads to other people's behavior. Is everybody tracking with me on this? So in general, not always in the specific. I mean, let's be honest. There will be some students in this class, just like in any class, who just check out. I get that. I'm not going to judge why, because there are all kinds of things that could cause a person to check out. For some people, this is a really hard way to learn. I get that. But in general, when we make positive assumptions about people and our behavior reflects those positive assumptions, people respond in kind. So if you've got people responding negatively to you, a starting point for you is to think about how are you treating them? Because you control that. You cannot control their behavior or their thinking, but you can control your actions and your thinking. All right. Clear? Pretty clear? Clear enough? Clear as mud? All right. Third point. Remember, I said 6. I want to go to page 4, talking about McClellan's acquired needs and the one that he actually cared about the most, which was need for achievement. So McClellan was doing his research in the 1950s. This is my morning get up and go. this morning it's Diet Pepsi in a can. Very exciting. It's necessary. Okay, it's absolutely necessary. I don't know what your thing is, but this is mine right now. This, and I'm not going to lie, at night, beer. Okay, not every night, not that much, but just enough that I don't lose my mind. Okay. All right. And maybe you're not a person who would drink beer or wine. That's cool. Eat chocolate or whatever it is that brings you joy. So McClellan's doing his work in the 1950s. He's trying to understand, what is it that causes some people to work so hard and want to do so well, and other people less so. And his premise is that a lot of this comes from inside of us. So this theory is an intrinsic motivation theory. It says there's something inside of us that causes us to be motivated. And remember what that is with effort. We're talking about intensity. We're talking about direction. We're talking about persistence, right? So it's something inside of us. What is that thing? So he posits that there are some people who have a really high need for achievement, and other people have a lower need for achievement. Remember, every one of us is somewhere on this continuum from low to really high. I'm going to tell you right now, I am really high. This is something that drives me, probably more than anything extrinsic does, anything external. This for me is probably one of the key drivers. So I like to be challenged. And guess what? So do a bunch of you. You told me that, and your colleagues, in this week's discussion question. You love a challenge. I like to get things done. People with a high need for achievement like to get things done. Sometimes people will have checklists of to-dos. If you're one of those people, you most definitely have a high need for achievement. You don't have to be the person who has a checklist of to-dos in order to have a high need for achievement. But if you do that, you totally have a high need for achievement. Here's another way that you would know if you have a high need for achievement. If you are the kind of person who has your list of things you're going to do, and maybe there's something that you just did, but you didn't have it on your list, if you would write it on that list and then check it off, oh my God, that is like uber high need for achievement. I'll bet some of you have done that. I know I've done it, right? Oh, I did this thing that wasn't on my list. I'm going to put it on my list and then check it off, which is ridiculous. And yet we'll do it, right? People with a high need for achievement want feedback. How am I doing? How am I doing on this project? How am I doing in this class? How am I doing in my job? And the reason they want that feedback is so they know if they need to make any adjustments. If I told you I'm not going to give you the score for this first exam until the end of the semester, how would you react? Go ahead and write it in the chat. I tell you, you're not getting your exam. I'm not going to finish grading it until the end of the term. Write in the chat what your reaction would be. I want to see what you got. Whatever your thoughts are, throw them in there. It could be whatever. Okay. All kinds of responses. Everything from anger, using different words, right? Mad, irate, disappointed, nervous. How will I know what I don't know? Frustrated, annoyed, nervous again, pissed, nervous. I wouldn't like it. I would be frustrated. That's fine. Annoyed, nervous, curious as to why, annoyed, frustrated, very anxious. Okay. Now, let's unpack that a little bit. Would that take a focus off our grades and focus it on learning and not learning for a grade? That's a great question. If you didn't know what your grades were as you went, would you then focus more on learning and less on the performance? For some people, maybe. Maybe. For many of you, no. It would cause you to not want to engage in the class. You wouldn't have a sense of, am I doing well? Do I need to study harder? Could I study less? Do I need to talk more to Lucy about this stuff in order to make sure I'm getting it? Or am I doing even better than I thought? Without feedback, you can't know. You can't know. And the whole idea of would you focus more on learning versus performance? This is a really interesting question. In fact, there's been quite a bit of research done on under what circumstances do people tend to focus more on learning versus just getting a grade. And what most of the research reveals is that in the academic setting, those two things are conflated. It's very difficult to pull them apart. I think most of you would complain mightily to friends, to the people you're living with right now. I know because I've had students, my advisees, in other classes where they haven't gotten timely feedback from a professor. Well, that drives them nuts. It drives them. And often they're almost always the students who tend to generally do really well. Now think about that. They tend to generally do very well in classes. And my definition of very well might be different from yours. I consider anything over BC very well, okay? So you might consider that too low or whatever, but people get very concerned as their normal or typical grades are higher because we want feedback. We live for feedback. That's having a high need for achievement. All you folks listing that it would drive you crazy, this is great. Annika's thrown in a comment. All of you who said this would upset you, I would say the odds are, without giving you some evaluation, odds are, in fact, you have a pretty high need for achievement. Annika's got a great question over here. I want to follow up on this. If we had pass-fail during this time, I feel like people wouldn't try as hard and think about their learning. This is awesome. I want to move away from lecture mode here to where we can hear even more of your comments on this. This has been out in the ether, right? This idea of should we be talking about going to pass-fail instead of letter grades? This is a fascinating conversation, in my opinion, for a variety of reasons. Let's have you share your thoughts on this. And the way I want you to do this, instead of just typing into the chat, is as you have an idea that you'd like to share about the whole idea of going to pass-fail instead of letter grades, just put your name in the chat, and then I'll call on you. You can talk. Okay. So think about this. What's your opinion about moving to pass-fail versus letter grades? Good, bad, indifferent? Throw your name in the chat if you're willing to share your thoughts on this. Or I could call on people, but I'd rather just have you volunteer. All right, we have a winner. Our first winner, Tiana. What do you think? Make sure you unmute and tell us what you think.
So one of my friends, her college actually decided to be pass-fail, but it was up to the choice of the student. And I think that is really important because then the student can decide whether or not they want to keep their grades, because some people might need this semester to boost their GPA. And then those that really feel as though that they need time to kind of, that the situation is too challenging for them and it could harm their GPA, I think it's then useful to have that. However, it kind of depends on the person. And then I know some people are going to take advantage of pass-fail, then some people might not and actually need it.
Great thoughts. Great thoughts. Who wants to chime in? You could agree with Tiana, disagree, offer a completely different take. I want to hear from at least a few people. So let's hear it. What do you think? Throw your name in the chat box if you want to share your thoughts. Again, I can always call on people, but I'd rather you volunteer. Okay, Annika, go for it.
Yeah, I would agree with Tiana in the sense that I feel like people like could need it if they feel like they aren't really in a good situation where they could boost their GPA, but also having a GPA is like important for anybody that wants to go to grad school or go past St. Norbert. So I feel like assigning pass fail wouldn't be a good idea, but allowing the students to choose would be a better idea.
Okay. Sam Schmitz, go for it. Share your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that one of the difficulties is that there are so many different classes that have different difficulties because there are some people that are completely different majors than I am. I know that my roommate had chemistry classes that he had to take that were really tough to learn online because a lot of it's like in-class lab stuff. And then there's other people that have really easy classes. So it's difficult to gauge. If the school decided that we were going to go for it, that might be good for some people and bad for others. But I think leaving it up to the students to choose which classes they want to go pass fail, or if they're classes that they know that they're doing really well in, they're really understanding it, then I think that they could choose not to. But then you come into the thing of you could choose somebody who has been trying in a class to just go off pass fail, and then they just do the bare minimum to get the pass. Whereas there are other people that are really trying to do well in that class to boost their GPA.
Also good points. Let's hear from at least two more folks. I want to hear what you think. This is very interesting to me, and I can tell you why when I'm done. I can tell you why I'm really interested in it. So at least a couple more people. Let's hear from you. It's 10:30 now, so we should all be pretty wide awake. Ish. Be bold. Lindsay, go for it.
I think that the pass fail might just cause people to, like you said, do the bare minimum. So I feel like it should be more something like a special circumstance if people get to do that. Like, say they have bad internet and they just can't accomplish it, or with their home life or something else, then they could, and like there would have to be more special circumstances than I'm just not doing that well in this class, so I'm gonna just go to pass fail because I feel like that's just letting them do the bare minimum. So, yeah.
Thanks. These have all been really great contributions. One more person. Claire, go for it.
Yeah, so the only thing, so it sounds like a lot of people think some people should get to do pass fail and some people shouldn't, just based off of circumstances and whatnot, which I would agree with. The only thing is from like a policy perspective, is that would be basically impossible for colleges to put in place. I mean, not impossible because it was mentioned before that some places have done that. But it's then turns into what is a special circumstance and who gets to have those privileges. Versus who has to work for it. So I think that would be a difficult balance to reach as a institution. So I just don't know where you draw the line in terms of, people who have bad internet versus people who might have difficult home lives versus people who need the GPA boost. So I think that would be a really tough thing to figure out.
Great. Thank you. Those of you who've chimed in. Are there any other thoughts that anybody wants to share on this? Anything contrary, in common? I want to make sure everybody has a chance. So I'll tell you why I'm interested for a variety of reasons. But one of them is at St. Norbert, I am, right now, I am the chairperson of what's called the Faculty Advisory Council. It's sort of, you might think of it as the representative committee of the faculty. And for next year, I've been elected to the role of faculty chair. And that's a really interesting role. Basically, in that role, I am the person who represents all of the faculty to the board of trustees and to administrative leadership, which is kind of a daunting role to be playing. All right. And already, because I'm currently the Faculty Advisory Council chair, and also because I'm the incoming faculty chair, I'm being asked to weigh in on policy decisions just like this that the college is contemplating. And this is one that that I specifically brought to people's attention, faculty attention, to discuss, and for us as a St. Norbert faculty anyway, to weigh in on what we think. And I'll tell you what we decided. We decided not to pursue pass-fail option for students for this semester. And the reason that we did that, the reasons that we did that, had to do with what we believed was the case, or is the case, in terms of the faculty-student relationship that we have here at St. Norbert. And recognizing all of the particulars that were raised by your classmates here, things like, do people have adequate internet? What are people's home lives like? Do we have some classes that, frankly, it's really hard to learn the material in an online environment, especially when faculty don't have a whole lot of time to prep those classes. Are you with me? So with all of that in mind, and more things, more nuances as well, we decided we were not going to go with pass-fail, that rather we would stick to letter grades, and we would, as a faculty, do our best to work with students to try and ensure that all of those ancillary factors would have as little impact on students' performance as possible. Of course, whether we just adopted a policy that said we're going to go to pass-fail, or we did what we decided to do, it will be imperfect, right? It's going to be imperfect. But what we didn't want to do was, first of all, make it more difficult for students who are thinking about graduate school to have to be concerned about not having a GPA. There's something else that I would say. The idea of students getting to choose in general, I'm on board with. I believe that in general we should recognize people's ability to make choices for themselves always. However, this is kind of a big however. I think oftentimes it is the case that people in a crisis situation, in a stressful situation, it's difficult for them to perceive what the consequences of their decisions might be. And while a person sitting in a class right now might think, holy crap, I'm dying in this class, I'm going to end up flunking, right? The reality is, unless they have just bailed from the class, they're probably, unless they were already on that path before we went to online, they're probably not going to end up flunking, okay? Fear tells us things that aren't accurate. Stress causes us to perceive things inaccurately. And people don't necessarily think about longer term consequences. The way that most people would look at a pass-fail on a student transcript, no matter all the nice things they might be saying right now about how other schools and employers will look at that in a positive way, I'll tell you right now, the underlying belief is that you just passed if you got a pass. Not that you passed with an A, but that you just passed, meaning you got that C or whatever the threshold was for the pass. Are you with me? And the last thing we want to do as a faculty is put our students in a position where they have to persuade people, no, I did really well. And if students could choose, well, I want to do pass-fail for this class, but a letter grade for this class, that sends that message even more strongly. You know, I got a B in this class and I took a pass in this class. Oh, that would suggest that you got a, here's the reality. When I look at all of you, it's as simple as this. I can tell you with 100% confidence, as long as you do your best, whatever that means, given your circumstances, and you've communicated to me adequately what those circumstances might be, you're going to pass. And I would say 98% of the faculty are on the same page. There's always, you gotta leave the potential for the few people who are just assholes, because there are those kinds of people in every work organization. Are you with me? But as a faculty, and I just chaired a meeting on Tuesday where we talked about this stuff. We did one of these, and I have all of my colleagues up, and we're talking about these things. And I can assure you, as I said, we are committed to the idea that if you do your best, given your circumstances, we're going to work with you. Therefore, we don't need to do pass fail. We're basically doing it, and we're going to have letter grades. Does that make sense? I mean, because we've all agreed that we're going to work with students, we're basically saying we're doing pass fail, but we're going to do letter grades so that those of you who earn better than a C, that actually gets reflected on your transcript. We want to make sure that you're in the best possible position. Frankly, we think that it'll put you in a better position than students from other schools that have just across the board adopted pass fail stuff. We think it gives you all a competitive advantage over those folks. And we expect that where students don't feel as though they've gotten that kind of support, if a student feels like they've really tried and they haven't gotten the support from the faculty member, they'll complain to somebody and it will get addressed. That's the expectation. I hope that makes you feel better. Honestly, we have a lot of faith in you all. I know I have a lot, and we didn't even, most people, most of your classes, you met for the first 8 weeks or whatever in person, right? So your faculty member. You and I haven't met, and I'm telling you right now, like I said, unless you just bail on me, you're going to pass. You're going to pass. I would add to that. That's the promise I always make to people. Always. I don't care if there's a crisis or not. If you have special circumstances that are making it difficult for you to do what you need to do, we need to talk about that, and then we'll make it work, right? To me, that's one of the things that distinguishes St. Norbert from other institutions. I hope that makes you feel better. So this high need for achievement, we all want feedback. Of course we do. That's how we know if we're on track. I can tell you right now, I'll tell you this as a general across the board. In addition to the grade that you would have seen on your own topic infographic, you're all on track. Life is good. Despite the fact that you're living with too many people in too small of a space with internet that's maybe not ideal and you miss your friends and the SNC food. Did you tell your parents to make potato bowl, by the way? We had that last week at my house. It's a winner. Okay. Fourth thing I want to talk about is on page, let me get to it here. Apologies. Page 6, lecture outline. Talking about equity theory. Equity theory, hands down, one of the most useful theories you'll ever be exposed to. You want to understand why people do what they do, why people act the way they do. Think about whether they believe they're being treated fairly. Fairness matters. Adults care deeply about fairness, especially adults raised in Western culture. It's a huge deal to us. We also believe deeply in the 3 kinds of justice that are middle of that page, and that's why I wanted to highlight those again. We care about what we get, that's distributive justice. We care about how it gets to us, that's procedural justice. And we care about how we're treated, that's interactional justice. If you were to pick up any, I was going to say a newspaper, but that would be bizarre, right? Forget about a newspaper. If you were to go online and look at the news, so that's the way I get news. I don't read a physical newspaper. I haven't done that in ages. I go online and I get my news. Almost all of the things that are controversial, where people are unhappy, where people are upset for any reason, almost all of it can be tracked back to one of these 3 kinds of justice. Guaranteed. I invite you to try that out for yourself, to just go and look at stuff that's making people crazy. For example, right now in the state of Michigan, there are people unhappy about the restrictions that have been placed upon them thanks to COVID-19. People arguing that the restrictions are a violation of their rights. This is a very interesting question, right? And I'm not going to tell you which way you should think about that. Nor am I going to bother you with my thoughts on it. Rather, I would like you to look at it through the lens of justice and what people think is fair. And that's the issue. Number one, they don't like the people who are unhappy about the restrictions that have been placed upon them in Michigan specifically. They don't like the content of those restrictions. That's a distributive justice issue. They don't like the process that's been used, where the government has made these decisions for people. So they do not believe that procedural justice has occurred. And then finally, there is an interactional justice issue where people feel as though they are not being respected. Their opinion wasn't solicited. They are not being respected. They are not being treated as adults who can make smart decisions. Are you with me? Now, I'm not telling you if the folks who are feeling these things are right or not. That's not the point. The point is what we're seeing in the news all tracks back to these perceptions of injustice. Now, I just picked one example. You could pick many, but just as an exercise for yourself, go ahead and just pull up the news at some point. It doesn't, whatever site, it doesn't matter, and see how much this justice lens helps you to understand why people are unhappy. Okay, so that's the point I wanted to emphasize there. Next point, the fifth of 6, is on page 7. Expectancy theory. And this is why it's so important to listen to the narrated PowerPoint. If you just read the book, you will miss the key point, which is that the first thing we think about when we're trying to decide how much effort to exert is whether we care about the outcome of that effort. In other words, what's in it for me? So we start by thinking about the valence or the value of the expected outcome or consequence of our behavior. Let's take an easy example. Imagine that you're a senior. The day will come. It will be glorious. It will be fantastic. Graduating is a wonderful thing, right? You're a senior. You're in your last semester of classes. You already have a job lined up. Let's just go there. And it's a job that you're excited about. You're like, yes, I can hardly wait to be doing that job. So the offer has been made. You've signed off. It's yours. You have 7 weeks left of the class. Some people will continue to care deeply about the grades they will get for whatever reason, probably because of their intrinsic need for achievement. Okay, that'll be a big part of it. And other people will not care so much. And I've seen both ends of the spectrum because I teach the capstone course. So I have seniors sitting in there, and I've seen the people who are just like, I am working at 100% until the final day, right? God bless them. They are so into it. They're like, I'm going to get an A. And then there are the people over here who are, I already got my job. I'm good to go. And while my job cares about the fact that I need to have graduated, they don't actually care about my GPA. So if I walk into the class and I say, all of these things that I'm asking you to do will help you to get an A, and the person on this end of the continuum says, but I don't care about the A, what would you predict in terms of their effort? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Put it down. Put your thoughts. What would you predict in terms of their effort if they don't care about that A? Lay it on. Lay it in there. There you go. Y'all are smart. Absolutely. I got to tell you, I kind of dig this use the chat thing to get people's thoughts because of the way y'all write. It's pretty great. It's like so honest, right? They ain't trying. Now, let me ask you a follow-up question. Because you're right, those answers they're all completely on point. They're completely on point. Their decision, those students' decision to not try that hard, is that a rational decision? Put it in the chat. Put your thought in the chat. Is it a rational decision? Yes or no? Or somewhat in between, whatever. Nice nuance. Good. It's great. Well, the answer is yes. Ish. I like ish. To them, yeah, they're looking at the outcome, which they don't care about. It has no value for them. Therefore, if they were to exert effort, they wouldn't be able to rationalize it. They couldn't explain it. That's what we mean by rationalize, right? They couldn't explain it. It wouldn't make sense. I don't care about the thing that's out there, the potential reward or outcome. Why would I work hard? Why would I? I don't care about that thing. Even more so if they just didn't want that thing, right? Then they'd be like, yeah, they. So when we're trying to understand why people don't put forth effort, the most important thing to consider, according to expectancy theory, and this is a key point, and I don't make it in the narrated PowerPoint. When we're trying to understand why people don't put forth effort, or they put forth very little effort, the number one possible explanation is they don't care about, they don't value the outcome that they would get if they tried really hard, if they put in a lot of effort. It's not worth it to them. Now imagine that you're a boss and you're seeing this with your employees. You're seeing that they're not putting forth a whole lot of effort. I'll tell you what a lot of bosses do. They make theory X assumptions. Notice the tie back. They assume that people are naturally lazy. By the way, that's a stupid assumption to make because people are not born lazy. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. When people behave in a fashion that suggests they are lazy, there's an explanation for it. And it's not that that's just the way they are. More often than not, what it is they don't value what they could get if they put forth the effort. They don't value it. So as a boss, if you're seeing that, what do you need to do? You need to make sure you know what your employees value, step one. Know what they actually value. Step two, give them that. Offer that. Make that possible. Otherwise, don't be surprised if people don't put forth a whole lot of effort. So key point, we want to understand why people do or don't put forth a lot of effort. First thing you should think about as a leader, well, what are we offering? What's the outcome? What's the reward? And is it something these people actually care about? If the answer is no, well, people not putting forth a whole lot of effort is rational then. Okay, last point I want to make is on page 8, sixth point, looking at reinforcement theory. And again, something I didn't talk about in the narrated PowerPoint. This is your reward for being here. God bless you. Of the two, positive or negative reinforcement, the one that does the better job of encouraging people to repeat their positive behavior is negative reinforcement. So I say to you, if you do well on the first two exams, you don't have to take the third exam. I set a threshold. I say, you get at least a 90% on the first two exams, you don't have to take the third exam. Versus, you do well on all three exams, I'll give you an extra 5 points. So what I just said, that was positive reinforcement. You do well on all 3 exams and I'll give you an extra 5 points. That's positive reinforcement. You've done something good. I'm giving you something good. Is everybody with me? Okay. That's going to incentivize less positive behavior than if I go with the first thing I said, which was you get at least 90% on the first 2 exams. You don't have to take the 3rd exam. That is a perfect example of negative reinforcement where you've done something good, so I take away something bad. That 3rd exam is that bad thing. You think people would study pretty hard for the first 2 exams? Would they study hard for the 2nd exam if they got at least a 90% on the first exam? Yes. Yes. Because getting out of taking an exam, who doesn't want that? Everybody wants that. Are you with me? Nobody in their right mind says, no, even though I got more than a 90%, I would still like to take that 3rd exam. Nobody, okay? So negative reinforcement, better than positive reinforcement. Key point. Last thing, extinction, better than punishment. And that I do talk about. So in the narrated PowerPoint, 2 ways to get people to stop doing bad things, punishment, extinction. Extinction works better. Let me give you an example. Imagine that we're in a classroom and I ask a question, just like I do here, except I would do it way more in a face-to-face classroom. You would see I'm much more interactive with people, okay? So I ask a question. And imagine that a student gives a wrong answer, okay? And so I yell at that student immediately. And I'm loud about it. And I say something like, it's obvious that you did not read the text. Because if you'd read the text, you wouldn't have thrown out that answer. I embarrassed that student in front of all the other students. Is everybody tracking with me? Now, okay, first of all, I would never do that, just to be really clear, okay? But let's just pretend, okay? Now you tell me in the chat, how would the other students view what just happened? I yell at the student who gave a wrong answer. And I pile it on. You obviously didn't read the book. Can't believe you even bothered to raise your hand. What are the other students thinking at that point? Yep. All the stuff that just showed up in this chat. Yep. This is all, I think, 100%. Absolutely. I mean, Evan, glad I did not raise my hand. You got that straight, right? Nobody's going to want to answer questions. I'm going to be like, whoa, I want nothing to do with this. Okay, so that's using punishment. How does the person I yelled at feel? Throw some ideas up in the chat. How does the person I yelled at feel? Put your ideas out there. Yep. Now I have to tell you, yep. Not at St. Norbert, but where I used to be, I had colleagues who actually did stuff like that. Mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. And everything that you predicted in terms of how the other students would respond and how that student would feel, all exactly right. Punishment, especially with adults, I would argue with kids as well, mostly leaves us with a bad taste in our mouth for the person who does the punishing. Period. Okay? Now, extinction. Scenario. We have a student who routinely puts their hand up. Any question I ask, hand goes up, hand goes up, hand goes up, and the answers go on and on and on and on when they get called on. Everybody with me? Yeah? Okay. Again, I'm relying on my people who've willingly shared their video and your nonverbals to help me out here, folks. Thank you. God bless you. Right now in the chat, So we've got the student who's always putting their hand up, always putting their hand. They go on and on and on. And you've all been there. You've all been in the class with students like this at some point in your academic career, right? You've been in school for what, at least 13 years or more. Put in the chat what the other students are thinking about that student. What are they thinking? Good nuance. Good nuance. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. These are great. All the above, right? All of the above. Maybe we can get let go early if you stop talking. Oh, God. Okay, here's the thing. You know, this scenario that I present to you is not just a classroom scenario. It also happens in meetings, right? Meetings that I'm in with colleagues where people just da, 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 da. And you know what I'm doing? I'm there on the sideline writing to myself, stop talking, stop talking, stop. Okay. Now imagine as the teacher, instead of yelling at that student, what the teacher does is not call on the student every time that student raises their hand. In fact, the teacher makes a decision to only call on that student maybe once every 3 or 4 times that the student puts their hand up. Everybody with me? Now, what do you think will happen with that student? Assuming the student understands the message that's being sent, and that's not always true, but let's just assume the student understands the message that's being sent. They're not being called on every time they put up their hand. It's relatively infrequent. What will that student be thinking? What do you think? Throw it in the chat. I want to see lots of ideas here. Some of you are very consistently contributing. Some of you should throw in your ideas. Those of you who haven't, let's see what you got. This is good. Y'all should just teach this stuff. I feel like you know it. This is great. Okay. I like the range that I was seeing. So one message that's going to come across to that student is, I need to cut back. I need to do this less. They will. Now, a good teacher under those circumstances wouldn't just ignore the person. They would also make sure that when they do allow the student to respond, that they give positive feedback so that the negative outcomes that you were listing where the student feels bad about themselves, those would be mitigated. Are you with me? What we want to stop is the constant answering. The best and easiest way to do that is to not always allow the person to talk. To basically extinguish that behavior by not calling on them. Calling on them sometimes, but not all the time, so the person gets the message, hey, constantly raising my hand isn't the right thing to do. While also making sure that the person knows that when they do give a good response, that that's great and that that's appreciated. Everybody with me? Now, how do you think the rest of the class, first of all, do you think the rest of the class would pick up on the fact that the teacher wasn't calling on that person all the time? Yeah? Yeah, I think people are pretty sensitive to these classroom dynamics. They would pick up on it. Do you think that they would think the things they thought with the punishing scenario? That the teacher was unprofessional, for example? Probably not. So this is the nuance that I want you to pay attention to. First of all, with extinction, we are more likely to stop the negative behavior than we are with punishment. And this is really important, with extinction, we are stopping that negative behavior in a way that respects everyone's dignity. That's a big deal. We can teach people not to engage in negative behavior without treating them badly. That said, the last thing I would say about punishment is that sometimes you have to punish. For example, if a person is engaging in unsafe behavior that has the potential to put others at risk, you may need to intervene swiftly and stop that behavior. And punishment may, in fact, be the most appropriate route. Okay. Any questions on chapter 5? Like I said, it's a big chapter. There's a lot. Okay, as usual, if you do, you know how to get a hold of me, right? So right now, we're not going to finish very early today, by the way, just because this is such a big chapter. I want to show my screen. I want to show you something with last week's discussion question. So let me go there very quickly. I think you'll find it interesting. I hope so. Okay. So hold a sec here. All right. So you should be able to see, does it look like a table with one word on the top? Is that what it says? Yes? Okay, great. Unfortunately, I can actually see the screen, but I can't see how you see the screen, which is why I need to rely on you to help me with this. So these are the words that you all gave. I typed them all in here. And you gave very interesting explanations as to why you thought these words described you, which is fantastic, and I appreciate that. This is a hard exercise, right? To have to just pick one word, just one word. Of course, there are so many words that describe each of you, but what forcing you to pick just one does is it forces you to prioritize of all the things, all the adjectives that you could use to describe yourself. If you only got the option to pick one, this is in fact a great interview question. I have heard this used in interviews for jobs. If you could only pick one word, what would it be? And a lot of times people want to hyphenate, you know, they want to have more than one word, but if you only picked one. And I think this is a fantastic list. And here's what this list shows me. When you look at this list, what I did is that I created this column, the big 5 link column, to show you, if we were to just look at your big 5 personality, remember that from chapter 3, individual differences, what each of these words relates to in terms of those traits. And what do you see? If you were to just look at the class as a group, you see a whole lot of conscientiousness, don't you? This is zero surprise to me for a couple of reasons. One, I've mentioned this previously, the kind of people who succeed academically, who go to college, tend to be pretty high in conscientiousness. Remember what that is. That's being reliable, dependable, organized. You may not always feel this way. It's okay. But in general, that stuff matters to you, right? Also, most of you are from the Midwest. Not everybody, but most of you. And one of the stereotypical personality traits of people from the Midwest, and of course it's stereotypical, meaning it doesn't apply to everybody, right? But stereotypically, Midwesterners are highly conscientious. When we say we're going to do something, we do it. We tend to be almost excessively reliable and dependable. It's one of the things that faculty members love about teaching students from the Midwest. We ask you to do something, you will do it. We don't even need to incentivize you much. Do you know why? Because intrinsically, in here, internally, it's part of your makeup. It's hard for you to imagine not doing what someone has asked you to do. I'm a Midwesterner too. So when I say you, I'm talking about me as well. So lots of conscientiousness as just one word, right? And of course, there are other words. I also saw a lot of agreeableness. Again, not a surprise. We're SNC, Comunio. I mean, the kind of people that go to SNC are generally nice people. Am I right? Under normal circumstances, one of my favorite examples, you're at the college. Just imagine you're at the college. We're in Coffrin. Remember, we're in Coffrin, let's say. And you're walking towards the door, and there's somebody who's already at the door, and you're 10, 15 feet away. What's that person who's by the door going to do as you are approaching the door? What are they going to do? Write it in the chat. What are they going to do? This is an easy question. Look at you all. Am I right? I mean, we are the nicest people on the planet. Slam it in your faces, Dave. Lies, Dave. Lies. You know better, right? I love it. I mean, a person could be 30 feet away. They could be 30 feet away. You know what I'm talking? We still stand there. We just stand there. We're running late ourselves, and we'll stand there and hold that door for somebody else. Oh, I love the people who are the community of SNC. So I thought you might find this very interesting. The wonderful words that you and your classmates gave to themselves. And I think they capture a lot of what I consider what makes SNC such a great community. Now, I want to show you another window. So give me a sec here. Talking about this week's discussion. And I got to get back down. Here we go. Okay. Are you seeing what looks like the discussion? Yes? Awesome. Let me make sure I get there. Okay. So, question, think of one thing that you love to do, that you could spend hours doing if you had the opportunity to do it, that you would do without pay. Here's what that question gets at. What this question reveals is your personal motivation theory. That's what's going on here. What actually motivates you? Let me show you very quickly some of what I'm talking about here. So we get in. And again, since you can all always see these, I'm not showing you anything that's, that you don't have the opportunity to see otherwise. Examples. Claire talks about playing tennis. What is it that makes playing tennis so great? It's so individual. I don't have to rely on other people. It's on me. It's challenging. These are the characteristics a person needs to have in order to succeed. Then there's this whole coach thing, working with people who push. Are you with me? This is a perfect example of a motivation theory, talking about both things that are intrinsic, inside, and extrinsic, outside. We can keep going here. We'll pick, let me just grab another one sort of randomly. This one, AJ, talking about canoeing. And by the way, whatever you picked is perfect. I want to be really clear about that. There's no right answer to this kind of question because it's your personal motivation theory that's being revealed here. I like to go canoeing. Why? Talks about my brother and I. So there's a social aspect to this. There's a relational aspect to this. But also just canoeing around the lake, looking around. We just really enjoyed being able to spend hours in near silence observing. So being quiet, being reflective, having that opportunity. For many of you, you may be an introvert. Having the opportunity to be alone, to think, to reflect, that's necessary for you to be successful. You could keep going with these. These are so great. Talking about hiking, I got to tell you, I always ask this question in class. I always ask this question when I start the motivation chapter. And here's what comes up. I like doing things that enable me to be competitive. I like doing things that are challenging. I like doing things where I get to be around people. Now, not all of these, of course, for each person, but these are some of the things. I like things where I get to learn something new. I like things where I'm growing. I like to do things where I have a chance to focus on things that are interesting to me. I like doing things where I get a chance to help others. Everybody with me? These are all motivation theories, intrinsic and extrinsic. What is it that's inside of you that makes you tick? What is it that when other people do it, it also makes you tick? So as you look at these responses, as you continue to, some of you still need to put that out there. Others of you still need to respond. Remember, you always need to respond to at least one other one. Keep this idea in mind that what we're actually looking at here are people's individual motivation theories. And I explicitly asked you to think of something where pay was just off the table, just not a thing that you cared about. Okay, not part of this thing that you find highly motivating. All right. Chapter 6. Here's the preview. Are you ready? In chapter 6, we're going to talk about some specific ways to make these theories come to life, some specific things that organizations can do to make these motivation theories come to life. So chapter 6 is a companion to chapter 5, in that chapter 6 applies a lot of the theories that were described in chapter 5. Chapter 6 is where my favorite theory resides. My all-time favorite theory resides in chapter 6. I hint at that in the narrated PowerPoint for chapter 6, and I will talk about it when we review chapter 6 next week. But you maybe could try to guess which one it is as you go through the materials. And again, I will talk about it in more depth next week, but it's my all-time favorite theory. And something you need to know, theories that can't be applied don't interest me. Theories that aren't useful don't interest me. No theory is perfect. It's not possible. No theory or model is perfect. They don't explain everything. But the ones that are useful, that help me to understand better than pretty much everything else, oh, I love those theories. Those are great. If they actually work, if I can see them in real life, oh, that's a winner theory. All right? So there's your preview for chapter 6. Let's talk about very briefly the topic infographics. Oh, we still will get out early today. So what you should have been able to see, you go into where the grades are in Moodle. You should be able to see not only the number of the grade that I gave you, but also a scanned copy of your rubric. Is everybody with me? I need to stop presenting so you can see what I'm pointing to now. Okay, so as I said, you should be able to see a scanned copy of your rubric. Yes? If you didn't see that, go back and look for it. It's there, okay? It's there. And what you'll see is I have checked for each of the criteria, and this was all on the syllabus, and this rubric is out on Moodle, so you could see it in advance. I've checked where I thought your piece fit, okay? And then indicated, you know, if you had an issue, maybe what the particulars were. But by and large, the email that I sent to you captures if there were issues, if people had issues, what those issues usually were. Almost always, if there was an issue, it was a failure to use that second person imperative. And then what tends to happen is your stuff gets too wordy and the target audience stops caring, okay? So that's a very important thing to pay attention to. Now, if you look at your topic infographic and then you look at your rubric and you disagree with how I graded it, you just need to talk to me. We could do a Google Hangout, and in 5 minutes we could resolve whatever. It's always possible that I miss things. All right. I'm looking at 26 of these. So that's possible that I'll have missed something. If you're not clear about why you got the grade you got, again, I would invite you to chat with me. Simple, 5-10 minute conversation. Easy peasy. Your next topic infographic is due in a week. So a week from today. Yay. Yay. You have to pick something from chapter 5 or 6 for that topic infographic. Some topic, you got a lot to work with, right? We got these nice meaty chapters on motivation. You got plenty to work with. You do not have to meet with me to review your draft infographic. You don't. However, if you want to, I'm happy to chat with you. Okay? So you need to reach out to me. And what can't happen is I can't review 26 of them starting at 10 p.m. next Thursday. Okay? So if you're going to want some feedback from me before you submit, let me know. Send me an email, and we'll find a time that works. And I'm happy to review those and give you feedback. You're just not required to do that. Questions about the topic infographics? Anything not clear? Any concerns? They were beautiful. I mean, like ridiculous. Apparently, working under quarantine conditions is ideal for this assignment or something. I have no idea what the real deal is. But I mean, and there were some, I might even just make the whole batch available to you all to see if you want. There were some that where you had taken an idea from one of those first 2 chapters and you had applied the concept to all of this quarantine, this COVID-19 stuff. I mean, all of them were great. And some of them I thought, oh, that's really quite spectacular. We ought to send those out for the world to see, you know? How to de-stress, for example, how to stay sane. The world would benefit seeing your great work. Anyway, I'm not seeing any questions. So I'm guessing. I mean, my ESP is not good. All right. So I'm still working on that, trying to read minds. But are y'all doing okay? Okay. We've only got 3 more weeks. You can do anything for 3 weeks. Trust me, you can. You have it. If you're having any issues, please don't hesitate. I'm your person. Reach out to me. This class or another class, life in general, I'm happy to listen. Okay? So until we are chatting again, namaste. Namaste means I see in you the light. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. Stay well, stay safe, and I'll see you soon. We're done for the day. Peace out, all. Peace out. See ya. Thank you, Tiana. You too. Have an awesome day, everybody.